ladies and gentlemen, to the Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this cold Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. Roll call, please.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. There is a quorum.
Is there public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you. In your packets, you'll notice the minutes of the April 18th meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion and a second.
Motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you. Ms. Conwell is here. Ms. Simon will unfortunately not be available. Okay, 2023-0005.
I'd also like the record to reflect that Council President Jones is in attendance.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2023-0005, renumbering section 202.07 of the county code to 204.02, and to clarify the duties of the county sheriff's department and the county sheriff.
Okay, before we start, at the request of Councilwoman Simon, I contacted Mr. Fitzgerald, who was our first executive, and he sent me a letter. I asked if he would like to come in. I also talked with Armand Budish if he would want to come in and talk. I think the more voices, the better when we're dealing with stuff like this. Mr. Fitzgerald unfortunately could not make it this time. I've left that invitation open for him to participate at any time in the future. He did send me a letter, which is in front of you. I shared with the media. If we could put this into the record. I'm not going to read it. It's actually a very succinct and good letter. And I'm going to go off the rails, Council President, and guess that we're not going to be giving anybody lifetime parking spaces. He knows what that is. It's an inside joke. But I appreciate, and I had a lengthy discussion with both executives regarding this and other matters, and it was good to catch up with Ed. For those of you that weren't here when Ms. Fitzgerald was our executive, I think not only were we all new, but we really, in my opinion, got this county kick-started in the right direction. Tough times, we coalesced. I think we, as a council, became a unit, and we maintained that, in my opinion, to this day, in that the only good thing is if it's good for Cuyahoga County, we're going to do that. So please take to heart the executive's letter, and again, I appreciate his helping us out in this matter. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the ordinance 0005, there were some concerns about the reports to be given to the county executive and the county council on that. So talked with our law department, and Section B of the ordinance now reads, the county sheriff shall issue quarterly reports to the county executive and county council on the operations of the sheriff's department, including but not limited to, number one, a quarterly update on the sheriff's department budget. Number two, staffing levels, including the number of budgeted vacant full-time equivalent positions within the sheriff's department. Number three, jail population statistics, including the total number of individuals housed in the county jail, the average daily population for the most recent quarter, and the number of inmates detailed by the jurisdiction, court, and docket under whose authority they're being held. And number four, field work statistics, including the total number of hours deputy sheriffs and other law enforcement officers under the sheriffs are out in the field, and the number of arrests and citations made, detailing the number of traffic, non-traffic incidents, and misdemeanor felony incidents. And to finish that section, the county sheriff shall provide additional information upon request of the executive or council. That's the difference in the ordinance at this time.
Okay, discussion?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. To my colleague, Mr. Kelly, I appreciate the effort and time that you're putting into this ordinance, and, you know, all the thought and, like I said, effort at trying to, you know, correct what you view as something that might not be functioning properly in government. I do appreciate that. The one question I have, and I just, I'm trying to get my hands on this, and I'm kind of on the fence, and I expressed that to you. I talked to the executive and I talked to the prosecutor. Both seem to be diametrically opposed to this for different reasons, and I was interesting takes by both of them. But my thing here is, currently we have the ability under our subpoena power to question the sheriff and bring the sheriff in at any time. So I'm just trying to guess or get why the need for legislation, why the need to put this in legislation to codify it, because we have the power already, and I just don't want to muddy the waters that are already pretty muddy with the sheriff and reporting duties and such.
So next to an elected sheriff, I felt that this would give the sheriff the most autonomy that he could get, with not having to constantly be at the administration building or whatever you want. If he's doing his job, let him do his job. Every 3 months, we'll get a report on it, and if we need to talk to him sooner than that can be done.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with that, but I think we both agree in principle that we'd like to hear from the sheriff regularly. I just think we already have the authority under the charter and the codified ordinances to do such. And then as far as, you know, the authority of the sheriff and such, again, after reviewing it with the staff a little bit, you know, the Ohio Revised Code really grants the sheriff to handle the day-to-day operations of the jail. So that concern should be alleviated by everybody, because it's codified under the Ohio Revised Code that that's his or her job or duties to do so. So I'm just trying to, you know, gather. I just don't want to muddy up the waters. I think there's a concern. That was kind of my concern with Councilman Sweeney's legislation that he was proposing too. It's not necessarily that it's a bad piece of legislation. It's just I don't know the necessity of it, and I'm trying to get to that point. I don't know that I'm there, but that's where I'm at right now. So
I would say that while that is correct, that the sheriff, by state law, has control of the jail, that didn't happen. And the Ken Mills trial is proof of that. And we had the sheriff in front of us. We had underlings in front of us. We had lies in front of us. And there was no consistency. And that's not all sheriffs. We had good sheriffs. And for one reason or another, they left. And hopefully that'll be cleared up soon as to why and what their thoughts are. I don't see harm in this legislation. I don't see muddying of waters. If anything has muddied the waters, was the charter itself in not electing a sheriff. And that was up to an unelected group of people put together to formulate the charter. It's never been told to us publicly, unless they had private meetings about this. I'll not know, because not only did they not keep minutes, those that were part of that committee have failed memories all of a sudden as to how we got here. I think the proof's in the pudding. We're in year 12 and we're still talking about this. We've gone to the people to change the charter, and we're ending up going back to get rid of, we're probably going to end up getting rid of the education aspect of this, which has seriously muddied the waters. So in our attempts in the past to clear the waters, we have found ourselves as the muddier of those same waters. We're finding our way. I just don't see the harm in this. There's no legal question in this that I've been told of, and I asked that immediately. It's an attempt to right the wrongs of the past as best we can without going full bore to an elected sheriff, which was attempted at one time and was rejected by this council. So I just don't, I see what your point is, but I don't see what your point is. The waters are continually muddied. We can't bring a sheriff in at any time. We did bring the sheriff in many times, and we just never really got to the truth. And I can tell you from my experience with at least the one sheriff, his concern when I found out I wasn't being told the truth was he was concerned about his retirement. And people got to feed their families, I get it. But does this help get us to a place closer to where I would ultimately like to be? Maybe. Does it muddy the waters? I don't see it. So, Council President?
Legislation. It does not muddy the waters in my estimation. There's no harm, as you have said. But I do believe it does begin to move the needle a little more in the direction that we needed to go in.
Excuse me, Council President, is your microphone on?
It is on, but I'm still would not get anything from it. My green light is on.
Try the on button. On button.
Can you grab that, Joe? Yep. As far as it's gonna go. Okay, I'm just gonna sit down. All right. Well, again, in terms of reporting, we use that term in two ways. Who that person reports to. In other words, who does he have to get permission from? And then, of course, reports in terms of the amendments in this legislation. How does he report information to us? How do we see the data that's necessary for us to, again, to provide oversight? In terms of asking permission, I like, and I'll take what Councilman Toomer said around the ORC. That's where it begins. He is to be over the day-to-day affairs. And we have muddied the waters in terms of the way the sheriff is set up right now. He does not have the state-given authority in the practical day-to-day operation. And that is the struggle we have been working to address. How do we reinforce in what we have in our local county charter and in our policies and in our daily actions? How do we ensure that he receives the power and the ability to operate the way the state has given it to him? He does not have that, and we have been working to do that. The reality is he has those he must get permission from, and those he must get permission from are the greater sheriffs. They are the greater sheriffs, and we are trying to, again, elevate him to the position of where the state has designated he should be. And I think that is what this legislation at its very core starts to move closer towards.
If I could just have a follow-up, I appreciate it through the chair, and I appreciate everybody's opinion here. It's, this obviously is what's a multi-layered issue, and there are a lot of moving parts to this that I know we're all doing our best to clarify. I'm still of the opinion that it's the people in the office that make the office work or not work, whether you have an elected sheriff, whether you have an appointed sheriff. I I just don't know, as far as the ability of the executive. I know it mentioned to me he wants to be able to appoint a new sheriff coming in and interview, at least provide interviews with sheriffs and appoint a new sheriff coming in. I don't know what this does. I don't know if maybe the law director has an opinion. Does this impact what the county executive is trying to do as far as interviews with the sheriff now and what he's allowed to do through the charter and such?
Mr. Chairman or the councilman, I don't see anything here that changes anything that's already in the charter and in our code. It's kind of along the lines you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, while I have you here on the spot now, while I have you, is this legislation only a reporting requirement for the sheriff to have a report to council and the sheriff? Is that the only addition outside of taking it outside of section 6 or 16, moving it?
Mr. Chairman, there are a couple other things it adds, regarding, how he handles his personnel, his budget, and things like that, but those aren't impactful. Those are things that he can already do, in my opinion.
Right.
With regard to moving it to that section titled independent, that has no meaning.
Right.
I mean,
So in short, everything that's required underneath this codified ordinance, the sheriff already has the authority to do, and council already has the authority to do.
I believe so, yes.
So it would just be putting it in writing again?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the councilman, the reporting requirement's a little bit more specific.
Right.
And it kind of gives the sheriff a heads up of what's going to be expected every quarter.
Right, and that's something that I requested
You know,
last
so it
week,
gives,
so that's
gives
why it's more
the
specific.
sheriff some
Right.
advantages to what he's doing.
All right, okay. That's good. And then to the chair, so we had no other appointed sheriffs respond to your inquiry to speak?
They're in the process, but I don't want their opinions on this legislation to sway what they want to talk about. The concern was through one member of council that they were cowardly in their exit by not discussing why they left. I've asked them to tell us why they left and what their opinion is on an elected sheriff. Can it be done this way, or can it be done with the elected sheriff better? I don't want that right now to sway this legislation. Although I can tell you, having spoken directly to all of them, I don't think you're going to be surprised as to what their opinion is.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just go to, I do believe it's the people you hire, and that goes for elected officials as well. And I think having only been in office, and again, I'm not doing the bidding for the county executive at all. I wish he or a representative was here. I know he did respond via letter, and I expressed that I would hope that he would come today or have a representative here today, but that's his prerogative to or not to. I mean, I think he's indicating the letter stands for itself. But I do think it would be fair to allow a new executive an opportunity to go through the process and hire his or her, man or woman for the job, and whether it's the current sheriff or somebody else, and see how that plays out. I just don't see what the harm is, especially if we already have the duty to request reports from the sheriff. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it right now.
Is there anything in this legislation that would lead you to believe that it would dissuade a candidate from being sheriff?
Yeah, I think us bringing forth legislation at this time, I think that an individual trying to look at the position is going to be concerned about what his or her authority is going to be if we consistently bring other pieces of legislation, like we had one from the Councilman Sweeney at the same time last week. There's talk of bringing legislation for an elected sheriff. That keeps coming up, rearing its head. So I think it might dissuade candidates. That's just my opinion.
Well, this administration's had over 120 days. And for us to grind the wheels of legislation to a halt, to afford anybody extra time, this legislation's been on the table. It's been discussed. It's been discussed with people privately. Short of you being able to point something to me that would tell somebody, no, I don't want to be sheriff of Cuyahoga County because of this legislation. Now, I can tell you that we've had many, not some, many candidates that didn't even bother, that would have been great candidates, that did not participate in moving forward because of the education anchor that we threw in. Now that I can absolutely point you to individuals that would have been great sheriffs but couldn't do it. But this specifically, I think, affords any sheriff more buffer to be sheriff. And, you know, again, proof's in the pudding. This is year 13. This wasn't our thing. We didn't do this. This was laid upon our table, and we're trying to fix it. And again, does this fix it? I think it gets us closer. I just don't see where it dissuades anyone from being sheriff. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Councilman Tuma. The other thing in this, it raises the sheriff's position up to that of the Inspector General as far as that goes. We don't know what's going to happen down the road in a few years where possibly the sheriff could then be told, well, you're going to report to this person, who then reports to this person, who then reports to the executive. What we're trying to do in this is to raise the sheriff up to that level where he's not going to have multiple people that he's going to have to ask to be able to do his job. And that was the main reason why I brought this forward.
I appreciate that. Just to Councilman Kelly, so there's no concern on your part that the sheriff would feel that now that there's a reporting requirement to council, that council is getting involved when it doesn't necessarily need to?
No.
Okay. That's just, again, we have the power and the authority to do this already when we need to, when we have questions. And I just think it's redundant, in my opinion, but.
Thank you. Ms. Simon is in attendance. Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Kelly, is there a list of what goes on? You read off a list. I didn't see it in the legislation. What goes in the quarterly reports, or what exactly information that you're asking for them to report in the quarterly reports? Because for me, if the right question or reporting requirements are not asked, I've found to believe that previous administrations have not been forthcoming, whether it's HHS, Public Works, or whatever. You have to ask the right question or what exactly you're looking for. So just for me, I would like to get a list so I can look at what are being required in the quarterly reports, and, you know, delve a little deeper. Are we asking everything that we need to ask? You know, if it goes forward, because if there's a little opening, they go through it. So we got to just make sure, if this legislation goes forward, for me, that if they're going to issue us quarterly reports, it's everything that we've previously had problems with. Will it really shed the light on that, like deaths and hospitalizations and all kind of things that I hear that goes on in there, which I don't know is attributed necessarily to the administration, but for what goes on in the day-to-day office work of the sheriff. So I would just want to make sure that that's fine-tuned. It's really clear exactly what those quarterly reports are asking, because if not, why do it? So I'm on the fence, just to let you know, but I would like to have that information to finish my decision, because I'm kind of I was leaning to my colleague Tuma's position. For me, I've wanted an original, and I've always tried to I don't know. I didn't see the proposed substitution, but and I will take a grilling and look at that a lot closer. But for me, the administrations have always this council, no matter who's been sitting on it, has always given the executive, who was elected by the people, a chance to do things, and some time to do it. Was a crazy year, all that was going on. So I've always been very respectful of that. When they're not hearing us, because I always look at us as the will of the people, because we have different districts and we hear from our constituents quite frequently how they feel on certain issues that we're sitting down here. And then that's when the dialogue really starts. But that's always how I've kind of been, giving Fitzgerald his time, giving Armin his time, and was going to give Chris his time. You know, I have my feelings of all the media stuff that was put out when we were determining the jail. And I felt at that time, and I would share that with Chris, that really shouldn't have been him or the other candidates' say about what was going on here, because they weren't here yet. They were trying to get here. But I'm also very respectful and trying to allow them a chance to fill their cabinet, and they know what the needs are. But quarterly reports, hearing from the law director, if it's not, in his opinion, it's not anything different or harmful to add to it, I could lean that way. But I just want to, if you're going to lean that way, be clear on what you ask. Because if you don't ask, they won't tell you.
Mr. Chair, I've expressed my position on this legislation repeatedly, and I'll repeat it again. It's not necessary. It's redundant. It just hosts problems for county council. And I'm looking at the substitute, which is something the executive, and starting with Fitzgerald, had metrics and already being done by the executive branch. So I don't know, why we're adding this on for us to analyze, because we're part-time. This really has to be the executive's role. And so I'm not supporting this. And I can say that County Stats was able to actually distill information about the sheriff's department, which led to the oversight was necessary with previous sheriffs. And I think that's already in place. I just think this isn't necessary and potentially harmful.
And just want to kind of take us back to our last sheriff, not the last, but Violent, when he was coming in. And I say this out of all due respect to our executive, our current executive. This is not personal. This is what I feel is rooted in 12 years of our experience with this jail, and how we continue to build what is to the best of our ability the most effective environment for the sheriff to operate in. And we had not exactly this, but a version of this type of legislation back then when Violent was coming in. And we deferred at that time, said, well, let's let Violent come in, get settled in, and after he looks at it for 6 months, then we'll act on what he thinks is best. Well, we did that. I did that. We did that. And several months later, after he got settled in, his answer was, just like at budget time, I can operate within the environment that I have been placed in. And that was the answer, so we did nothing. We did nothing. And it is, I think, an unfair position to put any sheriff in, existing sheriff, current sheriff, or any others, to actually weigh in on what their job environment should be to those they may be reporting to as of this moment. It's a challenge for that person to say to their boss, this is not the way we should do it. So it is on us to look at it, take our 12 years experience, and wherever you fall on the matter, have your own conscience about it. But I still believe this is a positive step in the right direction. It does not do harm, and it actually creates a sheriff environment where he can be effective, and he does not have to report, he does not have to ask permission, and he can be the most effective sheriff that we can in this type of environment. And when we say the right person, it's always about the person. Well, that's true, but that's not the only thing. You know, the environment that they're in and what the tools they're given play as much a part. You have to have the right person, but you're going to get different results whether you give them a pair of shoes to walk that mile or a skateboard or a Maserati. You know, they're going to have different outcomes as long as you have the right person. But you can't just say it's only the person. We have a job to give them the tools, put them in the right environment, give them the ability to be effective and unshackle them as much as possible to do the job that the ORC says they are responsible for. And we by experience, we've seen over these 12 years that person is not operating as ORC says, as that is the person who handles the day-to-day operations. There are other hands involved, and other hands are involved, and we need to find a way to create an environment where he can do as the ORC requires.
Mr. Chair, I want to say that I understand and respect the council president, but we had a sheriff in here who is not operating within ORC's requirements. And that sheriff's job was supposed to walk that jail daily. That sheriff did not do that. And that's why that sheriff left, because of oversight by the executive. The sheriff totally disregarded ORC, hid behind Ken Mills, and didn't do the job. I'm grateful that I had an executive and a county council to oversee that sheriff, to make sure that that sheriff was replaced by somebody that was going to comply with ORC. So your argument somehow that the executive is thwarting a sheriff from operating within the directives ORC is not substantiated by history or fact or going forward. That's not, to me, a legitimate argument at all. Secondly, why is a sheriff different from any other director? Medical examiner. Do you think the executive understands embalming? Maybe you do, Council President, but I don't think our executive does. So why not have the same type of legislation for every director? Is a sheriff above the law? Is a sheriff different? Is a sheriff so specialized that somehow the sheriff can't have oversight? My concern, obviously, is law enforcement, as we see in the news quite frequently, going amok and not having oversight. Why is this different from a police chief in the city of Cleveland who's appointed by the mayor? Why is this different from the police chief who's appointed by South Euclid, has oversight with the safety director, the Mayor Wheelo? Why aren't all these sheriffs or police chiefs selected? This is an incongruent place we're in, and it's only because we've had sheriffs who didn't want oversight. We saw the mishandling of warrants. We've seen mishandling of overtime. I believe there has been misconduct by sheriffs that were not disciplined because the sheriffs keep an old boys club at times. I'm not casting aspersions anybody specifically, but for us to sit back and think somehow a sheriff is different than any other director is not right. And I don't think anybody should be above oversight. The deaths in the jail occurred probably because of Ken Mills. He was taken to task because of this oversight. And when we remove oversight, that leads the way for corruption like we saw with Sheriff McFall. A sheriff that repeatedly got elected because of his name in this county. Don't be mistaken by that. And if we think somehow that, removing oversight is going to allow a sheriff to do a job any differently than the medical examiner, we've got to look twice at that. There's nothing different or special about a sheriff under this new form of government. I respect their jobs, but they're not above oversight, as it was voted on by the people in a charter government. It went amok because of Ken Mills and a cluster of alignment of some bad stars. Course has been corrected, and I think we need to move forward accordingly. But, I'm going to introduce legislation that every director then should not have oversight by the executive.
Chairman.
1 minute. I want to correct you.
Okay.
Sheriff Pinckney testified under oath. I testified under oath. And I'm not certain where Mr. McAleer's testimony went, but under oath, I told a jury of my peers in front of a judge that Sheriff Pinckney had no control over that jail. Sheriff Pinckney testified to a jury of his peers and in front of a judge that he had no control over that jail. I know for a fact he had no control over the jail. Ergo, we've got a problem with the statute. We've got a sheriff who isn't the sheriff and is told directly by the administration, you got nothing to do with the jail. So I'm a little touchy on that because I had to sit up there and testify under oath. And both of our testimonies said he had no control over that jail, with specifics,
Mr. Chair, are you telling me he was not allowed to walk into the jail?
No,
Okay.
he had no control. I really didn't want to get into this, but
Okay.
there's a
Well, we
reason
are.
why,
We
there's a
are.
reason why he got indicted. We authorized the hiring of nurses
Who got indicted? Mills?
and Mills. We authorized the hiring of nurses. We thought it was done. We gave the administration the money to do it and the order to do it. Not that they have to follow our orders, but we okayed the money. It got to the sheriff, that went to Ken Mills. Ken Mills, in my opinion, I don't know what happened because we still don't know because the administration didn't get called on the carpet during that trial, which I'll never understand, but I'm not a lawyer, but something weird was there. Ken Mills stopped the hiring of those nurses. Stopped them.
I'm glad we had oversight.
We didn't have oversight.
We did. We
He
had a committee
lied to-
meeting where the nurse showed up for Metro, and that's what launched this whole thing, is we were here as an overseeing body, and that person was able to come and testify and had the courage to do it, by the way. Unlike the sheriff, who couldn't stand up here and tell us this, which is another story.
Well, that again is another story.
That is, but
goes to the-
this is oversight, and if we remove this oversight,
Correct.
we always have had it. So why do we need this to?
And what I'm
Okay.
expressing to you there, it failed. And it
It
didn't
did
fail
not
because
fail.
of.
I would argue against, it didn't fail because we were able to find out and get rid of Ken Mills and.
How did we
straight-
find out?
Well, it all started to trickle out through investigation
No,
and our
no, it did
committee.
not.
Okay, well, I'm not going to take committee
No,
time,
no,
but,
the truth is important here.
okay.
The truth is very
Okay.
important.
So we found out about the nurse saying.
No, you didn't find out. I found out.
The nurse
No.
showed up here
No,
to
no,
say
no,
that.
no, no,
No?
no,
No?
No.
I
I know what I'm talking about.
Okay. Okay.
I find it embarrassing that I have to tell anybody on this panel what happened during the Ken Mills. I know nobody watched it.
Oh, no, we had people there. So I'm
No,
talking
we
about
had
the
people to
Metro
know. My
nurse.
colleagues should have watched it because this was a stain on us. And the only way I found out was I was getting third-party, second-party calls from inside the jail.
I was getting calls from the jail too.
And I
about
pursu-
Sheriff Pinckney.
And I pursued it. And all I can tell you is this, it all unfolded. That individual that came here, God bless him, was an accidental hero. He was not supposed to be here. Dr. Tallman couldn't make it. He was in Columbus. Believe me, I've lived this number of years. And I think this is a great example of what I'm trying to tell you. This is screwed up. This is screwed up.
What is
All
screwed
we're trying
up?
to do here, and it may not be the right thing. This may not be the right thing, but it's something.
I guess what is screwed up? That there was a malfeasance in the jail.
Not electing the sheriff
Ken Mills.
has, I mean, the proof's in the pudding.
Okay, I don't know, be clear, what is screwed up here? That there was Ken Mills and the executive did not.
Start at the beginning, start at the first
Okay, well, we
sheriff
better
to
be
the-
here a long time then if we're going to start at some beginning. But I don't agree with you that the system is all screwed up because we had a bad actor and we had an executive who at the time did not weed him out, but corrected that by bringing on Bill Mason and Bob Corey. And since then, the ship has been righted. And for us to undo a county charter, which is what the incremental step is here, because of that incident is not reasonable to undo because of an incident that was bad, but it was corrected. So for us to now say that everything should be thrown aside because of that is totally not reasonable.
Your recollection of history regarding this is different than mine. And I was the one that raised my right hand and swore allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and told the truth on the stand. And it's in direct opposition of what you think happened. Trust me when I tell you, I have nothing to gain and everything to lose by lying.
But what does it have to do with this?
I'm trying to fix something.
Okay,
don't
but I think
it's
we better
fixed.
get into your testimony and then see how whatever revealed in that testimony that I'm not privy to would be rectified and fixed by this.
All you
I
have
will
to
be
do-
happy to look at that. I will watch your testimony. I
No,
hope
don't
it's
watch my testimony.
recorded.
Go to
Is it
Pinckney.
recorded?
Go to Pinckney's testimony. It's on.
Okay,
you-
so it's not your testimony, it's
Oh, I
Pinckney's.
testified too, but Pinckney.
but I totally
but
will
the
love
sheriff
it.
who didn't have control of our jail.
All right, I will listen.
Testified to
Well,
that.
I'm glad to hear that he couldn't
Okay.
walk through the
Mr.
jail for
Council
some
President,
reason.
Thank you.
But I will watch both.
Watch Pinckney.
And then I will come back and see how this would fix it with an open mind.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't.
And if it doesn't, then why are
I
we?
cannot read the future, nor do I want to read the
Okay,
future.
I think Scott Tumo.
And we've attempted to try and fix this before with the charter change. And what we have
Yeah.
with the,
And Mike O'Malley, I guess the prosecutor is listening, who is advocating for this charter amendment by going to communities, by the way, and trying
What
to
charter amendment?
lobby the chart to or somehow, I'm sure he's watching, but he is trying to get this passed and also trying
This
to get 8
legislation?
votes. So hello, prosecutor.
this
And-
legislation,
He's opposed to this legislation, I believe.
we've been.
But he wants the other legislation. That's why I said this is
What's the other
incremental to
legislation?
that discussion. Anyways,
What's the other legislation?
well,
There's
we
currently
will
no
have another
legislation.
day about what's happening outside of this chamber with the prosecutor's office. But I want to
Mr.
focus
Sweeney's
on
legislation? What legislation are you
the
speaking?
one that I'm not going to discuss it any further, except there's outside forces who are watching and trying to influence the council members, and this is only a piece of that. So
okay.
I will watch or you don't want
Please.
me to watch yours, I'll
You
watch
can't.
Pinckney.
You
I'll
know
watch
what?
both.
I am very proud of my testimony.
I'm sure I
But I found it
understand.
interesting that Pinckney testified opposite of what you're saying happened. And I'm not.
Well, I
and I'm
wish he
not
would have
defending
testified
Pinckney.
here. I gave him a chance. It was
I'm not
really a
defending-
shame.
You did.
I did.
We all did.
We did. And he didn't.
I agree with you.
So the system isn't screwed up. It was the sheriff who was unable to come up to the podium as an intentional hero, unlike the Metro nurse who was an unintentional hero. But I want to watch the testimony.
Please.
And then I will have an open mind and I will look to see how that testimony might be, shape my view of this legislation. I appreciate my colleague Kelly for bringing this forward, but I will watch it and have an open mind. But
I
colleague
understand.
Tuma,
History is important, and I think if anything comes out of that, you'll get a good history of exactly what was going on or not going on in that jail, which very few people evidently know about.
I know it wasn't good what was happening with Kent Mills.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add.
Council President.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, first let me say this legislation does move us forward. Say that clearly, that is my position. This does move us forward. But the Ken Mills and all of those dynamics, it really speaks to exactly what I'm saying. You just can't take Ken Mills, throw it all on him and say that was a problem. No, it was you have to have the right person and put them in the right environment. He was in the wrong environment. Let's look at it. What was wrong about that environment? He had an employee under him, Ken Mills, who under him was undermining. The man was not truthful in this council chambers and served time in jail for not being truthful at that podium. So undermining was the issue. Now, the other concern is not who is under the sheriff, but who is over the sheriff. Those are the dynamics that we're looking at and that we're looking to address to create an environment where he makes the decisions as the ORC code says. You handle the day-to-day operations. You are the person with the experience. You should be the one making the calls on a day-to-day basis. That was the importance of understanding where Ken Mills and those above and below were.
Okay, just one thing, and then I'm going to yield to Tuma. ORC, we're a charter government. We're a charter government, and we're able to create our own environment. And so I just want to state that we have our own laws here, Council President, And ORC is no longer entirely applicable as you would want it to be. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I appreciate that. Just to my colleague Simon's point, I mean, I stated this earlier and I'll state it again. I do believe it is the person, not the process, that has been the issue here. And I can point to, you know, we had confirmation hearings a couple weeks ago with some departments. And one of the things that caught my eye is in you know, HR, there were 5 or 6 prior directors. And I don't hear a call for an elected HR person or, hey, we've got to revamp the entire system. You got to get good people in there. And the same thing happened with IT. Help me out, what was that thing called? What's that debacle? The ERP. The ERP was a debacle for years because of a lack of leadership. And finally, we have some stability and some leadership. And guess what? It seems to be working. It seems to be moving forward. So again, I'm going to say that I think it's about the people that you put in there and having the ability to do your job with the qualifications that you have. And that's again, just reiterating Councilwoman Simon's point.
Thank you. Councilwoman Conwell?
I didn't really raise my hand, but I will say, how does, just reading through the list now that I see it, how does this list of reporting responsibilities really speak to the issues that happen with the deaths of the jail? Or the things of knowing we can control budget, which we already have an authority to do. Jail population statistics, I think we already get that information. I think what we're all really want is to make sure that the people that make a choice to go into that environment are safe, they're housed right, they're not treated badly by the sheriff or workers. Those are the those are the lawsuits that I'm hearing in executive session. I'm not hearing anything that's listed here, so I don't know if this list is just needs a lot more detailing. But when you look at something in legislation, you wanted to be able to answer the questions toward the problems that were happening or created. And so how do we legislate making sure those individuals are treated right in the system, or the workers are treated right? I know I don't have time to go in there every day to overlook someone's shoulder to make sure that they're doing the job right, but I'm just tying that to the legislation. Either we need to ask a little bit more detail, because those are the things I'm concerned about. The budget, like I stated, we already have an oversight of that. We already know how many people are in the jail. We already know the jail is crummy and it's not decent enough for people to live. We see the contracts about the food and the various things like that. But the newspaper seems to find out these things about chairs being used and all this kind of stuff. So I just want to be clear. If we're going to push some legislation, let's make sure it's really revealing what I want to know, what the people want to know, is to make sure that those individuals that work there, as well as those that have to stay there currently, are being treated right. And I don't see anything added with Metro about medical. I've had a lot of complaints from family members about their loved ones. Not that they've not gotten great medical treatment, but it's like a hush-hush type thing. So if we're going to be open and transparent, my thought is just let's reveal it all.
Yeah, just on that same line, Councilwoman Conwell, that's kind of one of my points, is that we have the ability to ask those questions at any time. Council already has the ability to do this. I just don't know why we have to codify it and put it in writing. We have the ability to do that at any time. So that's why I'm a little confused as to the necessity of the legislation. And I'm not being, I'm not trying to be a smart guy or anything here, but that's just I don't want to over legislate. We talk about muddying the waters. I just think that's what we're doing here, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's a good discussion, and we all have opinions, and that's what makes this ball roll down the hill. Mr. Kelly, what's your pleasure?
Well, I originally wanted to just put this forward and see what happens. If Ms. Conwell wants to add something else to this, there's going to be a limit. I think you can't list everything in something like this. And part of what this says is the report shall include but not limited to those items that are written down there. And then right below that, shall provide additional information upon request. So, I mean, you can always get the answers to these things you want to know.
I get that, but we have to ask our staff, somebody has to be vigilant, or we have to make determinations amongst council who in our office staff are going to be vigilant on checking these reports, because that's another thing. Anybody can give you a report. How are we going to verify these things? And, and staying up. It matters to all of us. So who is going to be identified? I'm just putting things out there to think, because as I go through with HHS, I've identified certain staff to help me. I'm part-time. I do a lot. I meet a lot, but I know getting in the weeds sometimes is not what the majority of people want to do. But if you care about something and you're passionate about something, you've got to identify and put somebody there to have our backs when we're pulled in other discussions, like building a jail. So that's all I'm saying, is that maybe yes, we can ask anything at any time. And it's such a procedure. The only thing I don't like about the jail is it's such a procedure. You just can't drop in there. It's not one of them, I can surprise you, go in and see what you're doing type things because of safety reasons. That's the difference with this population. But I would just say, going forward, if we are going to move forward with this, with things that we already, I think Trevor keeps up with the statistics, who's in the number jail. We're just going to have to identify a couple of staff to really pay attention to this oversight, making sure that we're verifying what these things are on a quarterly basis, because we'll get down the way. We've put it in writing. The constituents feel, great, this is great. But if we're not really doing our job of what, and following up on this, we're right where we are now. We're not really knowing what goes on, only what they tell us. So I'm okay with what you tell me, but I found that several of us have went beyond and behind doors to actually really discover what is happening. So that would be my only suggestion. Putting something on paper, you want to be able to back it up and know, how do we verify this? And then there's a change also with NALA. I don't even know about it. I just heard that. So it's just a lot of moving parts and things. So let's just, I don't mind. We've always been very respectful to talk things out. I know you want to push it. You're excited. Doesn't mean that you got people on fences that might even support it. But we have always been a body that with those that, whatever position on the opposite side of the majority, we've tried to work those out and iron them out and change the legislation or whatever to benefit, all of us, so we can be a collective whole.
Thank you. And just along what the councilwoman was saying, we all have different opinions on this, and we're all trying to do the best we can to get to some reasonable agreement on how the office of sheriff should proceed, and accountability is a huge part of all of this. And again, under the charter, I do believe that the sheriff is accountable to both council and the executive as it is set up now. As the executive makes the appointment, we have to approve, and then you can be removed, or she can be removed by 8 council members. So there's accountability there. And to, my colleague, Kelly, I do respect your law enforcement background. I understand you're coming at this from a different angle. And you think this is a good piece of legislation, and I respect that. And, I'd like to see this discussion is a healthy discussion, whether or not this piece of legislation passes or moves forward at some point or not. It's a healthy discussion. And I know we're all trying to avoid, waking up one day and having that giant news story about something bad happening in the jail, and that the sheriff abdicated his duties, or that he was malfeasance or misfeasance or nonfeasance. I mean, and then we're going to be back here, and, all I can say is to the current executive is, you definitely need to communicate your position to all of council. So I think that's very important to be involved in the discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, where is the executive? Nobody's here to advocate a position? I see. Okay. I will watch the testimony as stated. That would be my task.
It was very interesting. I can tell you.
I
that.
can't wait.
It's your world that I walked into, and I don't want to walk back into that
Okay.
world.
So I'm a no vote on this legislation, but I will
That's fine.
watch it and see if there's a change in my position with an open mind.
It probably won't, but you'll get a good understanding of exactly how odd things were happening over there.
I don't disagree. It was a bad time.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Point to Councilwoman Conwell's point about the quarterly reports. I think they are important. And I don't think that this was meant to be completely comprehensive and exhaustive. And it certainly can be fleshed out to give a framework for the sheriff and what they report to us. And so I don't consider this having to be the final draft of what the quarterly report should look like. And we can still discuss on what that could be.
Yes, ma'am.
My added point, we need to flesh that out a little bit more, because I think there's a lot more things based on the lawsuits that we hear in the back room. There are other issues that are not put in here for information for us to know. That's number one. And then number two, true oversight is who's going to be following up on this stuff. So that's where I mentioned that we are going to have to, or you, going to have to identify a couple of staff in the office to get into the weeds a little bit of whatever they report to us. So all these departments stand up and report to us. Generally, we don't know if that's factual or not unless our staff sit in meetings with them or the constituents call us and say, So I'm just saying, let's also think about if this is going to move forward, to identify who that oversight is going to be doing. So as in our busy schedules, we can say, hey, can you give me an update? What have you found out?
I agree. Mr. Chair, if I can.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to knock anybody's legislation. I've had that done here before, so years ago, so I know. But I've also watched that we have been very respectful, and we will work together to be inclusive of everybody's opinions and what they feel, and talk amongst each other openly and privately to say, well, Patrick Kelly, what is your point of view? Because I get it. We all have a point of view, and I've got to understand yours. I'm going to watch the tape to hear what happened at the trial, to give me a more fuller perspective. But I'm just saying, this is not it alone. We need to also take that step. These are words to the people, but who's really going to do that oversight to check our facts? I don't know who the administration sets up and checks their facts in those jails, but I just think we need to, going forward, no matter what legislation, we need to do a better oversight. And how do we get that done? That's worthy of conversation.
Mr. Chair, I have to run, but this is where herein lies a problem for me, is the micromanagement potential of this council to oversee a jail. That's the problem that I see, because the buck will stop with us, and that buck should be stopping with the executive. We would have to hire somebody. In fact, I talked about with staff at the time of all the jail deaths of having a commission to oversee the jail. I mean, do we want to do that? We would have to hire somebody, you know, to oversee the jail. And I don't want that, you know, duty to fall on this part-time council body when there's a full-time executive. That's my concern, Councilman Kelly, is really redirecting the burden on this part-time council without the staff or the ability to truly be in the weeds with the jail, because that's what I think happens with the dynamic with this.
No, we'll hold it. Thank you very much. Councilman Kelly, so we'll hold this. We didn't read the substitute in, so, which is a good thing, I think. So we'll hold this, and we can discuss, and you can discuss with various council members where they're at with this and what they might want to add or subtract to this. But, so we'll hold it again, as with the other one. And is there anything else? Miscellaneous?
I just want to say to my colleague, this is progress. I mean, I know you're new, but this is actual progress, and I think the open dialogue really, you know, it helps.
Well, I think our intent was not to be the oversight committee, is to allow, I think the intent is the sheriff to be as independent as possible with less input from us. We're kind of the stopgap when things go wrong, and we're happy to be that stopgap. But usually that has to do with personnel, things like that. Deaths in the jail you mentioned, nothing's going to stop that. The sickest of the sickest are in our jail. The best thing we could do is maintain health care for them. And on top of that, the best thing we can do, short of that, is build a new facility that'll provide a better atmosphere and a better existence while in our custody and care. And that's what we, I think, ultimately owe to the people that are in our custody and care. So Councilman Kelly will be discussing with those that have issues with this, and we'll see where this goes. No further information or questions?